Black mask, I'm a nuisance, pound and a plan, trying to be Bruce Wayne. I ain't slowed down since about last May, 'cause this grind don't sleep and I dream all day. And I'm far from sane, cursed with a gift, my only saving grace. Firstborn son and they think I'm crazy, till the sky falls and they see my reign. First thing, they don't know about the vision, no wonder why there's all eyes on me. Came from a place where the grass ain't green, so the blood, sweat and tears really stain my tea. And I can't find sleep, always awake, guess it ain't that deep. Everywhere I go, I'm just counting sheep, so I gotta lead the way like little Bo Peep on the kid.
Equal pay is a long-standing debate that has been a focal point of sports for the last few years. Women's football has had one of the largest voices surrounding equal pay, especially in the United States. But here in England, where do people's opinions lie on the scope of equal pay?
There isn't equal pay with men's football anyway. So I don't think there can be equal pay, but in a sense, but I feel like women should get paid more, especially in football, because the men get overpaid at the end of the day. No, like, as hard as football is and the level of football, it's not really worth 250k, do you know what I mean? But in a sense that the women, there should be way more money put into the women's game, where equal pay shouldn't really be the question. It should just be like, they should get this, not they shouldn't get the same amount as the men do, but at the same time they're doing the same thing. They should get paid way more for their services and way more in regards to their ability. Like, there's some world-class players out there. They should get paid they should get world-class wages, you know what I mean?
Like I mentioned, we're not asking, for me, I don't think it should be equal pay. For me, I think the men are on too much money anyway, but that's just my opinion. And I think, you know, for us, it's just being able to live and being able to give 100% into football. There's so many players that can't do that right now, that needs to be changed. Because like the men's, they, you know, the amount of fans they get to games, obviously prior to COVID, you know, the amount they're on TV, the amount of shirts they sell, you know, it's so much, it is different, and it's we can't compare female and male sport, and especially in football, because the amount they must get for the audiences they get at games, in comparison to, you know, a club having 1,000 fans, you can't compare it. But it's, you know, the hours and the effort and the sacrifices that we put in are exactly the same. You know, if anything, we probably train more. We're in for more hours than male footballers. So it's coming to a common ground. It's coming, you know, we need to meet somewhere that more needs to be done to support female footballers.
The equal pay debate has obviously been a debate that's been long standing. For me, it's hard because it's not unknown that we don't bring in the same revenue as the men, but then there's also the argument that we are doing the same job, so what's the difference? But for me, the gap does need to be smaller, because at the minute it's massive. And obviously, the more people buy into the women's game in terms of the media side, the development side, every aspect of it, and realise that it can be a big change in women's football, then we're kind of static, if that makes sense. But you could see, like I said before, the 2015 World Cup, you can see where people have bought in and how far it's grown now. So it's a case of, it is going in the right direction, but slowly. But yeah, I think we'll get there.
Women should be paid the same as men for representing their country, because they work just as hard, they put in as many hours. Often they do it with not the same amount of great facilities that the men get. So I think on an international level, on a federation level, yeah, they should be paid the same. On a club level, no, I think you're never gonna see that. You do see it in some countries. Like I know that there are some clubs for instance, in Denmark, that have total pay parity for the coaches. So the manager of the women's team is paid exactly the same as the coach of the men's team. You know, there is that happens at some clubs. But again, it's an individual club thing. I don't think it should be mandated that it should be equal pay for clubs, but certainly when representing a country, I think it should be equal pay.
You know, there's the famous court case with the US women's national team. You know, then they took the whole system to court over equal pay, and to understand really what they're doing, it's again, you have to educate yourself on the argument. They're not asking for equal pay out of the blue. You know, they're one of the most successful ever sports team the planet has ever seen. They're at the highest level of their sport. They have icons. You know, you should see the fuss some of these players get when Rose Lavelle's just moved to Man City, and New Balance have arranged a whole new range of clothes and football boots because of this move. She is a global icon. She's not asking for equal pay because she scored a couple of good goals and she wants a part of that life. They have earned that. They make that money. And the whole US national team system make more money from the women's team than they do the men. And it just you need to understand the argument before you can have a valid opinion on that. Like I said earlier, you can always have an opinion, but it doesn't mean it's always correct. You're always entitled to it, but you need the education of the argument for it to be valid, and they have a very valid claim to equal pay. Not all women's teams do, and not all women's teams are asking for equal pay, but the ones that have earned the money are asking for it, and that's all they want.
Championship, and they're still having championship in women's football. They're still having to work alongside playing.
Yeah.
At the second top tier in England, you're still supporting your first main job and your passion. So there's clearly a massive gap if you're in the second league and men's football is in the second league. Yeah. You can support your whole family. You have to look at stuff beyond pay. You have to look at pay, but you look beyond just like the crowd and the sponsorship. You have to look, how do they support themselves? Can they support themselves? And in women's football, at the top end, yes, I think they can. As you go down from top scale, which is the WSL, I'm going to stay to English football because that's where I have better knowledge. It just drops and drops and drops. Like even third tier, they're classed as semi-pro, or some may be professional, but can they survive without having a full-time job? Probably not.
The game is growing, the level of investment and sponsors, etc. is growing. Yes, slowly but surely. Again, we're seeing a huge amount of disparity between the rate of growth at the Super League and the rate of growth of a Div 3. The gulf of that growth is getting more and more vast, but at the top level, we have got enough resources and money going in now where players can be full-time. For me, I think full-time at Chelsea looks very different to full-time at Bristol. I think we need to be in a place where full-time really means full-time. Do you know, you're getting a good wage, and what I mean, you know, 30 or 40,000 pounds a year to be a footballer full-time. That is all that you have to do. That is all that you think about. You live and you get to breathe it. The minute we can do that, the minute technical, tactical, social, psych and physical will improve in the women's game again and move on again and make it more competitive, because I think we're at a place now where some clubs are full-time, good wages, and they can solely focus on that. Sometimes some places and some clubs are full-time, almost like full-time part-time, I'd say. So you're getting £8,000 to £12,000 and you're doing your studying and this, and you know, again, I'm thinking from a social and psychological perspective. When you're juggling all of that, you're probably not as grounded and focused on football as you would be if you are men's under 18s, where, you know, at times at good clubs now, if you're an under 18 or a 23 scholar, you're getting £2,000 a week. like £1,000 to £2,000 a week, so you're making more than a professional female footballer.
It's really, really sad that female athletes are having to go to court and campaign for something that should be a given anyway. I think it's a terrible thing to happen. I mean, what happened with the American national team, I think is awful. They shouldn't have to campaign for equal pay. It should just be expected anyway. But I think that just shows the level of misogyny that still exists. And it's not even just in women's sport, it's across all industries. It's a thing that's there, and it really shouldn't be. I mean, hopefully it will get better. But
it's generations upon generations of institutionalised sexism.
Absolutely.
Bred into human society.
Thanks for finishing me off there. I lost my train of thought.
People talk about equal pay in the women's game. I think in America, obviously the women's game is a top profile. It's doing very, very well. So I believe there's something similar towards equal pay. In this country, I think it's a bit different because ultimately market forces decide, how much you get paid. And it seems that, advertisers or the people, the money men or money women in football aren't yet ready to dip their hands in their pockets to invest in the women's game. I think we sort of saw like a spurt in growth after the Women's World Cup. There was a lot of hype, a lot of things positive, moving in the right direction, where people were saying, okay, hold on, this is the moment where the women's game takes off. But obviously after that, we sort of saw a drop off, and obviously the pandemic has coincided with obviously companies not really having money. But ultimately, to answer your question, I think when we speak to the women in the women's game, they're happy with the progress that's being made. In the case of Lucy Bronze and Alex Greenwood, they've obviously played for Lyon, which is like a top club in the women's game, and they seem to be happy with their careers. Obviously, progress can be made, but again, let's take it step by step.
Tough one, because like we already mentioned, in America, where the women's game is far more established, it's easier to find a bit more parity in terms of pay between the men's and the women's game because of the appetite. The people go out in their droves to watch women's games out there, and again, in terms of the figures within there, you got people like Megan Rapinoe. These are huge. These are superstars, right? She is a brand in herself. Mm-hmm. And I think the issue that we have when we compare that to the game over here in the UK for women is that we don't have those superstars. We don't have those companies investing, putting their hands in their pockets to build the brands and the profiles of these individuals. And then that has a knock-on effect, because then there aren't people, young kids, who are eager to go and see these people in real life and want to go and watch them live. And so I think we are still quite a way away from being able to have parity in terms of salaries, because there isn't enough interest within the women's game over here to drive that. Again, going back to something that Dej said, he said that it's the market that drives this. It's market forces. In order for there to be higher salaries within the women's game, there needs to be more people purchasing tickets, more people purchasing merchandise, and all the rest of it. And so until we get to that point, it's going to be really, really difficult for us to then have that discussion about having equal pay. Of course, it is the desire. And ultimately, it's the direction that things should move in. But I think there are a number of different things that need to be done beforehand and in the foundations in order to get to that point.
I think Budge hit the nail on the head. I don't think there's much more that I can add. But I think, it goes back to the amount of money in the men's game versus the amount of money in the women's game. And when you look at it, there's a massive disparity. So to get that equal pay is going to be very difficult because there's not enough money in the women's game. But I think, as Budge said, that's something that eventually will start to happen as the game continues to grow.
A lot of the times the argument is, well, women shouldn't be paid equal because they don't have the same number of fans, or they don't bring in the same revenue. But I think with America, they're showing that they are world champions, they are more successful than the men, they have arguably bigger crowds than the men a lot of the times. So it's like, well, if that's the evidence that you've got, then and it's still not equal, then it needs to be changed. So I think there needs to be more people like Megan Rapinoe and the US national team to fight our cause. Yeah.
Lewes FC in East Sussex is one of the shining lights and examples of equality in world football. We were invited by the general manager, Maggie Murphy, to discuss the principles of Lewes and why they have decided to take on the task they have.
Lewes Football Club is a tiny little club. It's the mouse that roared. We are a 100% community-owned club, so anyone can become an owner of this club. And it has a stack of principles and values. So we're a club that likes to do things differently, but we like to do things right. So we're a club that's really well known for our equality stance. We treat our male and female players exactly the same, whether that's in pay or facilities. The way we treat them and value them is the same. But then on top of that, we've got loads of other principles and values, like we are concerned, for example, about the normalization of gambling in football, because we think that there are some negative effects that can seep into our communities and into our cultures. So, Lewes Football Club is the best football club in the world.
Absolutely more needs to be done. I think it starts at a grassroots level where the investment needs to be there. Our girls being encouraged to play at school. You know, I got an extra little job with the club here where I go around the schools and just kind of encourage girls to get involved. I tell them about the club and kind of just show what we're doing here, and hopefully that kind of incentivizes them to get stuck into it. But if you don't have the coaches, if you don't have the opportunities, if you have to travel further to get to these places, then obviously those are just continuous barriers that girls have to overcome. And I'm not saying men don't have to overcome those as well, but it's a lot easier for men to find themselves in the football systems that they just can keep going to the next level. But it's harder for women and young girls especially to kind of navigate to that next step. So I think investment definitely helps. I think, local communities could probably do more, and just we're starting to see now like more investment in coaches and kind of trying to push female coaches as well. I think that helps kind of bring that community together. So hopefully it's a changing thing, but more can be done, I reckon.
I think that when we talk about what we've done in terms of the equal pay, we put out a challenge and we say, okay, we've done it. How about you guys now? And I think that we don't mean to make it look easy, because it's not, and it took leadership and it took sacrifice and it took bold decisions. But the pushback, some pushback is questioning whether it's viable in the long term. Sometimes people say, well, if your women get promoted, they need to be paid more than the men. And we are kind of saying, no, we are a club, we're going to do this split equally. And then others think that it detracts from what they see as football. So they think, maybe the club is spending too much time talking about our principles and our values, and maybe we should just get back to the football. I think that sometimes it masks discriminatory attitudes. I think sometimes the remarks that we get are quite sexist, including from our own fan base from time to time. But that's reduced over time. I think that the more that we've done this and the more that they start to come and watch the women play and they're like, oh yeah, they're actually pretty good, right? Oh yeah, okay. Then you chip away at some of the negative attitudes. At the same time, we have put ourselves out there. We put our head above the parapet and we've said, right, this is what we believe in. And so sometimes when things don't go right, we'll get someone slapping our wrists. So one time, one of the pages on the website was broken and I had someone say, well, you talk about equality, but your website's not working. And I'm kind of like, let's break this down. But do you see what I mean? I think that some people want to find a reason. They think that maybe we're spending too much time on something. And a lot of the time I'm thinking, well, you're spending a lot of time thinking about it. We're just doing the doing. So
the FA Cup's the FA Cup. Why is the prize money in the men's FA Cup so much significantly higher than the women's? I think if we could make the FA Cup on par with the men's, the prize money in that could actually help feed a lot of women's football without us having to even address the day-to-day club level, the equivalent of the Premier League versus the WSL. I don't think we even need to bring that conversation into play, because we can just level out one competition, right? And that just comes down to the backers of that competition, grouping them together maybe. I think there's a really easy way of trying to integrate that. I think FIFA do a great job of treating the women's game not equally, but it's certainly got a greater standing with the men's. They're trying to commit more to it. And I think that's the example that we've got to take. I think for me to sit here and say, do I think that Steph Houghton as England captain at club level should be getting the same wages as England captain for the men's team? No, I don't think it can happen right now, because I think when let's just take their respective clubs. Like, let's say we've got a Manchester City player, Raheem Sterling, and let's just say Steph Houghton, Manchester City. No, they are not going to be on the same weekly wage, because it is to do with the rights holders and the fact that the Premier League is a worldwide brand, and there's so much more that needs to be done with the WSL for that to happen. So I say, yes, we need to try and address a little bit of the balance. It shouldn't be 1% of the value or 5% of the value. We need to be trying and getting the professional women's wages up to a level whereby, they need to be on 25%. I don't know. I'm plucking a figure out the air. But I think the things that we can control are the things like the FA Cup, different competitions. And those can be potentially more equal billing. I mean, I don't know what you think, Kate.
We were quite vocal last year on the FA Cup prize money. So in the final alone, the women's teams earn 0.69% of what the men's team win in the final. So we kind of called that out because we think, first of all, people should know that. Second of all, we think it shouldn't be like that. And we'll get lots of people that will tell us that we are naive and stupid, and maybe I should go back to school and all this kind of stuff. And then they'll come out with their whataboutery. Well, they'll come back with, oh yeah, but there's more men's teams in the FA Cup. And I'm like, okay, great, let's break it down then. There's about 700 men's teams, that there is only about 250, 300 women's teams. So if we split it equally that way, our total prize pot should be 8 million. Brilliant. Okay, I'll take that, because right now the women's prize pot in total is £300,000. So I'll take your 8 million. Thank you. So you kind of get a lot of people that are quite quick to tell you that you're wrong or naive or stupid. I'm just used to that now. That's fine.
For me, it was like, don't be scared to be the odd one out. If you enjoy something, then just go and do it. Because I never thought, when I was growing up playing with boys, like, I don't think I ever scored a goal. I wasn't very good. Like, I would just, everyone had to start wearing shin pads because I just foul them all the time. But like, I never thought they would take me to America, it would take me to France. And like, my friends now and the opportunities I've had through football are just ridiculous. And like, there's people who have more opportunities than me. There's people who are less. But if I'd given up because I thought, I don't belong here, or one comment, then it would, like, I don't know what I'd be doing with my life. So it's like, just if you enjoy something, whether it's football, whether it's rugby, it might be the more feminine sports, dancing, just go at it 100%. Yeah.
When it's a club like Lewes, who obviously famously have an equal pay policy, that's to be completely applauded, because what they've done is they've come from that viewpoint from the very beginning, and they've gone, our female players will get paid the same as our male players, because both teams are attracting similar backing. Both teams might be attracting similar fan bases. And even if they're not, even if the men's is slightly higher, we can actually level this up fairly easily. Where you can't do that, as Lindsay said, is somewhere like Manchester City, where the women's players are treated equally in terms of support, in terms of the food that they eat, the sports science available to them, the rehabilitation equipment support available to them if they're injured. All that's equal. It's just that the pay isn't, and I can understand why. If there's any club out there thinking of doing the same as Lewes, and they are in a similar position in terms of where their men's team are, then I'd completely applaud that. At the moment, there's too much difference if you're Manchester United men and you're Manchester United women.
Say we had a women's team that was 3 leagues, the equivalent of 3 leagues above the male equivalent side. They should be getting paid more. Now, what a step that would be to say, you know what, our women's team is way outperforming. They're two or 3 leagues higher than what the men's team are. And it might be the equivalent of League 2 level or non-league, I don't know. But to be able to say, right, we're paying the women's team more than the men's because they're doing better.
And that's the example with the pay dispute over in the USA as well, with their national league, in that the women brought more revenue in. The league argued that the men had more sponsorship deals, I think. But the women have been able to prove there that they've achieved much more success on the pitch, and their performance-related pay was not equal to the men, yet they've been performing so much better. So if you take the example from the US, the women should be paid more than the men based on their performance, performance-related pay, and then just based on salary too. But yeah, it's a really interesting conversation, and maybe it's one that we'll have in 10 years' time, and we'll go, well, this is incredible because look, this women's team is outperforming the male equivalent.
I just think that as soon as the Premier League or Championship, because both of those leagues are separate to me, you just have to discount those ones for now, and hopefully one day, maybe in our lifetime, that will be addressed. But I just think that the gulf is just way too much with those two leagues at the moment. But I think anything below that, you can really aim to target to try and get more equality. We're
pretty fair and square when it comes to the clubs in our league. So Crystal Palace, Aston Villa last season, Leicester City, or Coventry, these are big clubs, and already we're punching above our weight, right? So I think that in some ways we've already proven that if you just invest better in your women's team, you can succeed. Of course, I would love it if we could take that to the next level. I would love it if we were in the WSL, of course, because I think that is then us proving concepts even further. We're proving that equality can be success on and off the field. So we're super ambitious. We need to find the partners that believe in us, that want to be part of that story as well. But the pressure, I think, in some ways is on how soon it will be before it's just about the money. So can big clubs that we're currently playing against turn on a tap suddenly, and will that just distort the league immediately? I don't have a tap I can turn on. I wish that all I had to do was lobby the chairman of my club. Unfortunately, my chairman is completely supportive of what we do and already splits the resources. So we have to find the resources somewhere else. But yeah, I think that the bigger clubs are starting to wake up and are starting to turn on the tap, and that could drown us out.
As we continue to seek the conclusion to the equal pay question, teams like Lewes showcase how successful teams can be when equal parity is displayed. As women's football continues to grow, so does its influential characters, who continue to throw in the kitchen sink.
I ain't slowed down since about last May, cause this grind don't sleep and I dream all day. And I'm far from sane, cursed with a gift, my only saving grace. Firstborn son and they think I'm crazy, till the sky falls and they see my rain. Wait, all these paths and they led to pain. Straight, walk to my own, come scarred like Cain. Hate, they changed the rules so I changed the game. Fate, Destiny's child, tell them say my name. Born to be great, so they try put me in the corner. Heat on Max, still made it out of the sauna. Well kept an eye for an eye like the Torah, so I swing the light through the dark sky walker. All these demons in my air like a private caller. I see the top, they wanna keep me at the border. Not even up, they already pray I fall off. Black mask, I'm a nuisance, pound and a plan trying to be Bruce Wayne. I ain't slowed down since about last May, cause this grind don't sleep and I dream all day. And I'm far from sane, cursed with a gift, my only saving grace. Firstborn son and they think I'm crazy, till the sky falls and they see my rain. Then they see my rain. Crazy till the sky falls and they see my rain.